4 times. 4 times in a single night, Alessandro touched her as if she were made of the most delicate porcelain and the most dangerous fire. 4 times Isabella whispered in the darkness those words that changed everything. Words that made a man who commanded empires freeze in the middle of reaching for her. "I've never done this before." And each time, he stopped. Each time he looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe, and promised her the same thing. "Then I'll make it unforgettable." But when the first light of dawn broke through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse overlooking the city, when he saw the small traces of blood on the Egyptian cotton sheets, Alessandro Romano did something he had never done in his 39 years of life. He cried. Not tears of regret, but tears of a man who had just realized that what he felt for this woman went infinitely beyond the desire that had consumed them throughout that endless night. If you want to discover how a medical emergency in the middle of Manhattan transformed 2 complete strangers into souls that could no longer exist separately, subscribe to the channel right now. Leave a like if you still believe that true love exists even when it begins with the most unlikely circumstances. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening to this story from? Your presence here makes all the difference and gives life to these narratives that celebrate real love. The New York winter was merciless that February night, the kind of cold that penetrates bones and makes even the bravest think twice before leaving the comfort of home. The streets of Manhattan were covered in a thin layer of ice that reflected the neon lights of the city, transforming everything into a dangerous skating rink. Inside the lobby of the St. Regis Hotel, the heat was almost oppressive, a stark contrast to the frozen hell outside. Alessandro Romano adjusted the cufflinks of his Tom Ford suit as he waited for the elevator that would take him to the presidential suite where an important business dinner was taking place. At 39, he was the kind of man who commanded attention without saying a word. Not just because of the tailored suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, but because of the aura of absolute control he carried like a second skin. His dark eyes, almost black, usually sharp and calculating in negotiations that moved millions, now seemed distant, tired of a life that despite all its luxury had become predictably empty. The hotel was his second home, maybe his first, considering he spent more nights there than in his own penthouse. It was neutral territory where he could conduct business without the weight of his family name, without the memories that haunted the walls of the Romano mansion. He was about to enter the elevator when he heard it, a sound that made him stop immediately. A muffled moan of pain, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone collapsing. Alessandro turned quickly and saw a woman on her knees near the hotel entrance, one hand pressed against her abdomen, the other trying to support herself on the marble floor. Her nurse's scrubs were partially hidden under a worn winter coat, and her face, contorted in pain, was pale as snow. Without thinking, moved by an instinct he didn't know he possessed, Alessandro ran toward her. His Italian leather shoes slipped slightly on the polished floor, but he didn't slow down. He reached her, just as she was about to collapse completely. Miss, can you hear me?" His voice, normally cold and commanding, came out urgent, almost desperate. She lifted her face, and Alessandro felt something shift inside his chest. Her eyes were green, the color of spring forests, now clouded with pain but still incredibly expressive. There was intelligence in that gaze, and a strength that fought against the obvious suffering. "Appendix," she managed to say through clenched teeth, her voice trembling. "I think it's my appendix. I need to get to a hospital." Alessandro didn't hesitate. In one fluid movement, he scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She let out a small gasp of surprise mixed with pain. "Hold on to me," he ordered, and there was something in his tone that made her obey without question. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and Alessandro could feel her trembling, could smell the faint scent of hospital antiseptic mixed with something floral, lavender perhaps, that seemed to emanate from her hair. "Call my driver immediately," Alessandro shouted to the concierge as he strode toward the hotel entrance. "Tell him to bring the car to the front now." And call Mount Sinai Hospital. Tell them Alessandro Romano is bringing an emergency patient, and they should have a surgical team ready." The concierge's eyes widened. The Romano name opened doors that normally remained closed. Within seconds, the black Mercedes was at the entrance, and Alessandro's driver, Marcus, was holding the door open with an expression of controlled alarm. Alessandro slid into the back seat, still holding the woman in his arms. She was curled against his chest now, her breathing shallow and rapid. "What's your name?" he asked softly as Marcus navigated through traffic with the skill of someone who had driven in New York for decades. "Isabella," she whispered. "Isabella Santos." "Isabella," he repeated, and the name sounded different in his mouth with the slight Italian accent that he had never completely lost. "I'm Alessandro. You're going to be fine. I promise you." She looked up at him, and even through the pain, something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps. A connection that neither could explain. "You don't make promises you can't keep," she said, and there was a ghost of a smile on her pale lips. "I always keep my promises," Alessandro replied, and he realized with surprise that he meant it, that for this woman he had known for less than 5 minutes, he would move heaven and earth to keep that promise. The trip to the hospital was a blur of red lights that Marcus ignored, horns honking in protest, and Isabella's increasingly labored breathing. Alessandro held her the entire time, one hand stroking her hair in a gesture that was both comforting and strangely intimate. He found himself whispering words in Italian, things he didn't even realize he was saying. Words of comfort, promises that everything would be okay, prayers to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. When they arrived at Mount Sinai, the medical team was already waiting at the emergency entrance. Alessandro had called ahead, and his name had worked its usual magic. They tried to take Isabella from his arms, but she clung to him for a moment. "Stay," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Please." And Alessandro Romano, who never let anyone dictate his actions, who made billion-dollar decisions without blinking, found himself nodding. "I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere." The hospital waiting room was a study in contrasts, harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Plastic chairs that were designed for function rather than comfort. And the omnipresent smell of disinfectant that seemed to permeate every surface. Alessandro sat in one of those uncomfortable chairs, his expensive suit completely out of place in that environment, drawing curious and some suspicious looks from the other people waiting. He didn't care. His mind was entirely focused on what was happening beyond those swinging doors where they had taken Isabella 45 minutes ago. He had called to cancel the business dinner with a brief text message. His partners would understand, or they wouldn't. At that moment it didn't matter. Nothing seemed to matter except knowing that she was okay. "Mr. Romano?" A surgeon still in his scrubs approached, and Alessandro stood immediately. His heart was beating faster than it should, faster than it did before the most important negotiations of his life. "She's fine," the doctor said with a professional smile. "We performed a laparoscopic appendectomy. The appendix was inflamed, but hadn't ruptured yet. She was lucky. Another hour and the situation could have been much more serious." Alessandro felt relief wash over him like a wave. "Can I see her?" "She's in recovery now, still under the effects of anesthesia, but yes, you can see her." Room 312. Alessandro didn't wait to hear anything else. He found the room easily, guided by an instinct that seemed to know exactly where she was. When he entered, his breath caught. Isabella was lying in the hospital bed, her dark hair spread across the white pillow, her face still pale but peaceful in sleep. There was something incredibly vulnerable about seeing her like this. Something that made Alessandro's chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. He approached slowly, as if afraid to wake her, and sat in the chair next to the bed. Without thinking, he took her hand. It was small and delicate in his, with calluses that spoke of hard work and dedication. A nurse's hand. A healer's hand. He didn't know how long he sat there, just holding her hand and watching her breathe. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. All he knew was that he didn't want to be anywhere else. You stayed. Her voice was soft, still thick with the effects of anesthesia, but there was genuine surprise in it. Alessandro looked up and met those green eyes, now clearer, more focused. I promised I would. Isabella smiled. A real smile this time, not clouded by pain. Most people don't keep promises to strangers. I'm not most people, Alessandro replied, and there was no arrogance in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. And maybe we're not strangers anymore. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes traveling over his face as if she were trying to memorize every detail. The strong jaw, the dark eyes that seemed to hold entire universes, the lips that despite everything carried a softness she hadn't expected to find in a man who looked like he commanded the world. "Thank you," she finally said, "for saving my life. You're exaggerating. I just brought you to the hospital, in your private car, getting me immediate treatment that would normally take hours, using your influence to make sure I had the best care possible." Isabella tilted her head slightly. "Who are you, Alessandro Romano?" He could have told her, could have explained that he was the CEO of Romano Enterprises, that his family owned half of Manhattan's most iconic buildings, that his name opened doors in boardrooms from New York to Milan. But looking into those honest green eyes, Alessandro found himself wanting to be just a man. Not a brand, not an empire, just Alessandro. "I'm someone who's very glad he was in that hotel lobby tonight," he said instead. The conversation that followed was strange and wonderful at the same time. Isabella, still groggy from the anesthesia, spoke with a candor that perhaps she wouldn't have had under normal circumstances. She told him about her work as an emergency room nurse at Bellevue Hospital, about night shifts that stretched for 12 hours, about patients she saved and those she couldn't. She talked about her dream of becoming a nurse practitioner, about the classes she was taking at night while working full-time. Alessandro listened, genuinely fascinated. There was a passion in the way she spoke about her work, a dedication that went far beyond a simple job. She spoke of saving lives with the same intensity that he spoke of building empires, but there was something purer in her motivation. She did it because she genuinely cared about people, not for profit or recognition. "And you?" she asked, her eyes beginning to close despite her obvious effort to stay awake. "What do you do besides rescuing damsels in distress?" Alessandro smiled. "I build things. Buildings mostly. Try to leave something permanent in a world that's constantly changing." "That's beautiful," she murmured, her voice becoming softer, sleepier. "Building things that last." Her eyes closed completely, and her breathing became deep and regular. But she didn't let go of his hand. Alessandro sat there, watching her sleep, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had spent years building an empire, accumulating wealth and power, surrounding himself with all the luxuries money could buy. But sitting in that hospital room, holding the hand of a woman who dedicated her life to caring for others, who lived in a studio apartment in Queens and took classes at night to better herself, Alessandro realized how empty his life had been, how much he had been merely existing instead of living. A nurse entered to check Isabella's vitals and raised an eyebrow when she saw Alessandro still there. "Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago," she said, but her tone was more amused than reprimanding. "I'm staying," Alessandro said simply, and there was something in his voice that made it clear it wasn't a request. The nurse looked at the way Isabella's hand was intertwined with his, at the protective way he leaned toward the bed, and smiled. "I'll bring you a blanket." The night passed slowly. Alessandro dozed occasionally in the uncomfortable chair, but mostly he just watched Isabella sleep. He memorized the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks, the small scar on her chin that he wanted to ask about, the way she occasionally frowned in her sleep as if she were solving some complex problem even in her dreams. When dawn broke, painting the hospital room in soft golden tones, Isabella opened her eyes. For a moment she seemed confused, disoriented. Then her gaze found Alessandro, still there, still holding her hand, and something in her expression softened. "You really stayed all night," she said, and her voice was filled with wonder. "I promised," Alessandro replied simply. And in that moment, in that hospital room with the sounds of a city waking up outside the window, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that whatever this was, whatever had begun the night before in that hotel lobby, it was something neither of them could ignore, something that would change everything. 3 days passed before Isabella was discharged from the hospital. 3 days during which Alessandro visited every morning, every afternoon, and every evening, always bringing something. Fresh flowers that transformed the sterile hospital room into a garden. Books he thought she might like, gourmet meals from the city's best restaurants because he insisted hospital food was an insult to the palate. The nursing staff began to recognize him, smiling when he appeared with his arms full, his expensive suits gradually becoming more casual, until on the 3rd day he showed up in dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look even more devastating. "You don't have to keep doing this," Isabella said on the 2nd day, gesturing to yet another extravagant bouquet of peonies and roses. "I know you must have important things to do." Alessandro set the flowers on the windowsill and turned to look at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There's nothing more important than being here." The simplicity of that statement, the absolute certainty in his voice, made something flutter in Isabella's chest. She had dated before, had relationships that she thought were serious, but no one had ever looked at her the way Alessandro did, as if she were the only person in the world that mattered, as if everything else was just noise. They talked. God, how they talked. About everything and nothing. Alessandro told her about growing up in a family where love was measured in stock portfolios and business acquisitions, where showing emotion was considered weakness. He spoke of his mother who had died when he was 15, of a father who had never forgiven him for choosing to study architecture instead of going straight into the family business. Isabella shared her own story, growing up in a modest Brazilian immigrant family in Queens, parents who worked multiple jobs to give her and her younger brother opportunities they never had. The pressure of being the first in her family to go to college. The guilt she sometimes felt for wanting more than the simple life her parents had built. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" Alessandro asked on the 3rd afternoon, sitting in the chair that had basically become his during those days. Isabella looked up from the medical journal she was reading. "What? You genuinely care about your patients, about making a difference. You're not doing this for recognition or money. You're doing it because you can't imagine doing anything else." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's not admirable. That's just who I am." "Exactly," Alessandro said softly. "In a world where everyone has an angle, where every action is calculated for maximum benefit, you're genuine. Do you know how rare that is?" Isabella looked at him, at this man who seemed to have everything but spoke as if he had nothing, and felt her heart do something dangerous. Something she knew she should probably be more careful about. On the morning of her discharge, Alessandro appeared earlier than usual, and Isabella noticed immediately that something was different. He seemed nervous. A crack in that usually impenetrable facade of control. "I have a question to ask you," he began, and there was an uncertainty in his voice that she had never heard before. "And I want you to know, you can say no. There's no pressure, no obligation." Isabella's heart started beating faster. "Okay. Would you let me take you home?" "To my home, I mean, just for a few days, until you recover completely." He spoke quickly, as if afraid she would interrupt. "I have a guest room. A full-time staff. A private doctor who can monitor your recovery. You live alone." And I know you don't have family here in Manhattan who can take care of you. I just want to make sure you're okay. It was a crazy idea. She knew it. Knew that accepting would cross a line, would transform whatever this was into something more complicated. But looking into Alessandro's eyes, seeing the genuine concern there, the way he was almost holding his breath waiting for her answer, Isabella found herself nodding. Okay, she said softly. But just a few days. The relief that washed over Alessandro's face was so palpable, so genuine, that it made Isabella's decision feel less crazy. Maybe even right. The ride to Alessandro's penthouse was a revelation. The building was in Tribeca, one of those glass and steel constructions that redefined luxury. The doorman greeted Alessandro by name, and the private elevator that took them directly to the penthouse required a key that Alessandro produced from his pocket. When the elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, Isabella couldn't contain a small gasp. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The decor was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and neutral tones with carefully selected art pieces on the walls. It's too much, isn't it? Alessandro said, and there was almost an apology in his voice. I never really decorated it. Just hired someone to do it. It's beautiful, Isabella said honestly, but it doesn't feel like you. Alessandro looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? It's perfect. Too perfect. Like a magazine spread. Where are the personal things? The photos? The books you love? The things that make a place a home? No one had ever said that to him. No one had ever looked at his multi-million-dollar penthouse and seen not luxury, but emptiness. Alessandro swallowed hard. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's sad, Isabella said softly, and there was no judgment in her voice, just genuine compassion. A woman appeared from what Isabella assumed was the kitchen. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and an efficient demeanor. Mr. Romano, welcome back. And you must be Miss Santos. I'm Marie, the housekeeper. I've prepared the guest room as you requested. The guest room was larger than Isabella's entire apartment, a king-size bed with what looked like 1,000 thread-count linens, an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub, a small sitting area with views of the city. It was overwhelming. This is too much, Isabella protested weakly. Nothing is too much, Alessandro replied, and the way he said it made it clear he wasn't just talking about the room. Over the following days, an unexpected dynamic developed between them. Alessandro worked from home, taking calls and video conferences from his study while Isabella recovered in the guest room. But every few hours he would appear, always with some excuse. Did she need anything? Was she comfortable? Had she taken her medication? The truth was transparent to both of them. He just wanted to be near her. They fell into a routine. Breakfast together on the terrace when the weather allowed, Alessandro insisting she needed fresh air. Afternoons when he would read to her, his voice with that slight Italian accent making even boring medical journals sound like poetry. Evenings watching the city lights come on, talking about everything and nothing. One night, 5 days after she had moved into the penthouse, they were sitting on the couch in the living room. A fire crackled in the fireplace, because despite it being February, Alessandro had noticed Isabella got cold easily. She was curled up on one end of the couch, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, while Alessandro sat on the other end, maintaining a respectful distance that was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. Can I ask you something? Isabella said suddenly. Anything. Why are you doing all this? Really? I'm just a nurse you met by chance. You don't owe me anything. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with an honesty that surprised even him. Do you believe in moments that change everything? In encounters that aren't accidental but destined? Isabella's breath caught. I don't know. Maybe. I do, Alessandro said, turning to look at her fully. I believe that you collapsing in that hotel lobby, me being there at exactly that moment, all of it happened for a reason. I believe that sometimes life puts people in our path precisely when we need them most. The silence that followed Alessandro's confession was thick with unspoken possibilities. Isabella could feel her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. The firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw, the intensity in his dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "Alessandro," she began. But he held up a hand. "Let me finish, please." He shifted on the couch, turning to face her more fully. "I've spent my entire adult life building walls, protecting myself, telling myself that emotion was weakness, that caring too much was a liability in business and in life. My father taught me that. Every failed relationship reinforced it." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that revealed his nervousness. "Then you appeared, in pain, vulnerable, completely dependent on a stranger's help. And something in me just broke open. Or maybe it woke up. I don't know." Isabella's eyes were wide, locked on his face. "In these past 8 days I've felt more alive than I have in years. Maybe ever. You make me want to be better. Not more successful, not richer. Just better. More human, more real." "I'm not some perfect person," Isabella said softly. "I have flaws. I'm stubborn. I work too much. I'm terrible at asking for help. I eat cereal for dinner half the time because I'm too tired to cook." Alessandro smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I know. You also hum when you're reading something interesting. You check your phone compulsively because you worry about your patients even when you're not working. You have this small wrinkle between your eyebrows when you're thinking hard about something. And you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Not because of how you look, but because of who you are." The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Isabella could barely breathe. "This is crazy," she whispered. "We barely know each other." "I know," Alessandro agreed. "Completely insane. Irrational. Goes against every logical thought I've ever had." He moved closer, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. "But I've spent my whole life being logical, being rational, making calculated decisions. And where has it gotten me? To a beautiful empty penthouse and an equally empty life." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently cupped her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone with such tenderness that tears sprang to Isabella's eyes. "I don't want to be logical anymore. Not about this. Not about you. What do you want?" Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. "I want to know everything about you. What makes you laugh? What makes you cry? Your dreams, your fears. I want to know why you became a nurse, what you think about at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. I want to learn every freckle, every scar, every story written on your skin." His forehead touched hers, and they stayed like that, breathing the same air, hearts racing in tandem. "I want to make you happy. I want to be the reason you smile. And I know it's too soon, I know I sound like a madman, but I can't help it. You've completely undone me, Isabella Santos." A tear slid down Isabella's cheek, and Alessandro caught it with his thumb. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared because I feel it too. This pull toward you that doesn't make sense. I'm scared because you're from a completely different world. I'm scared because I've never felt anything this intense this fast, and I don't know if that means it's real, or if it's just the situation, the drama of how we met." "It's real," Alessandro said with absolute certainty. "I've had enough meaningless encounters to know the difference. This is real." Terrifying, and irrational, and real. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand against her face, the solid presence of him so close. When she opened them again, she had made a decision. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Let's see where this goes." slowly. No promises, no expectations, just seeing each other, getting to know each other for real. Alessandro's smile was blinding. Slowly, he agreed. Although I should warn you, I'm not very good at slow when it comes to things I want. Then you'll learn, Isabella said with a small smile. Consider it character building. He laughed, that deep, genuine sound she was beginning to love, and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It was chaste, almost innocent, but it sent shivers down Isabella's spine. The following weeks were a study in contrasts and discoveries. Alessandro insisted Isabella stay in the penthouse until she was fully recovered, and she found herself agreeing more because she wanted to than because she needed to. They established routines. Morning coffee on the terrace where Alessandro taught her to appreciate espresso the proper Italian way. Evenings cooking together, where Isabella was amused to discover that this billionaire who commanded empires was utterly hopeless in the kitchen. "How have you survived?" she asked, laughing as he somehow managed to burn water for pasta. "I have people," he said with mock dignity. "Many very competent people who cook for me." "Well, tonight you're learning. Every person should know how to make at least basic pasta." The domesticity of it all was startling. Alessandro found himself canceling meetings, rearranging his schedule, just to spend time with her. His assistant, Margaret, who had worked with him for 12 years, was shocked when he left the office at 6 in the evening. "Are you feeling well, Mr. Romano?" she had asked with barely concealed concern. "Better than I have in years," he had replied honestly. He took Isabella to his favorite places in the city, small hidden restaurants in Little Italy where the owners greeted him by name and served dishes that weren't on any menu. Jazz clubs in the village where they sat close together in dark corners, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Art galleries in Chelsea where he watched her study paintings with the same intensity she brought to her medical journals. "You really love art," she observed one afternoon as they stood in front of a massive abstract canvas. "I studied architecture because I loved the idea of creating beauty," Alessandro explained. "But my father considered it impractical. Art for art's sake was wasteful in his eyes. Everything had to have a purpose, a profit margin. That's so sad," Isabella said, threading her fingers through his. It had become natural, this constant need to touch each other. Small gestures that reinforced the connection growing between them. "What would you have done if you could have chosen freely?" "I would have designed buildings that weren't just functional, but beautiful, spaces that made people feel something when they entered them." Art and architecture combined. The wistfulness in his voice made Isabella's heart ache. "It's not too late, you know. You could still do that." Alessandro looked at her in surprise. "I run a multi-billion-dollar company. I can't just walk away." "I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying incorporate your passion into what you already do. Design buildings that have soul, not just square footage. Use your position to create beauty, not just profit." No one had ever suggested that to him. In his world, you chose one path and stuck to it. Pivot was not a word in his vocabulary. But looking at Isabella, at this woman who worked brutal shifts saving lives and still found time to pursue her dreams of advancement, Alessandro felt something shift. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe he could build something that mattered beyond the bottom line. One evening, 3 weeks after that first night in the hospital, they were cooking dinner together. Isabella was teaching Alessandro how to make her mother's recipe for Brazilian feijoada, patiently guiding his hands as he cut vegetables. "More uniform pieces," she instructed, her hand covering his on the knife. "Otherwise they cook unevenly." Alessandro was acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her body against his back, the scent of lavender that seemed to be her signature. "Like this?" he asked, deliberately cutting poorly just to keep her close. Isabella laughed, seeing right through him. "You're terrible at this on purpose." "Maybe I just like you teaching me," he admitted, turning to face her. They were suddenly very close, her back against the counter, his hands on either side of her, caging her in without touching. "Alessandro," she breathed, and there was a warning in her voice. A reminder that they had agreed to go slowly. "I know," he said. "Slow." "I remember, but can I at least tell you how much I want to kiss you right now?" Isabella's breath caught. They hadn't kissed yet. Not really. Just those chaste touches to her forehead, her hand, her cheek, building anticipation, letting desire simmer beneath the surface of every interaction. "How much?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "So much that I dream about it. I imagine what you taste like, how you'd feel against me, what sounds you'd make." His voice was rough with desire, but he didn't move, didn't push, giving her the control. "I think about it too," Isabella admitted. "Every time you look at me, every time you touch my hand, I wonder what it would be like." "Isabella," he groaned, "you're killing me." She reached up, her hand touching his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "We said slow. We did. But maybe one kiss wouldn't hurt. Just to see." Alessandro's control, legendary in boardrooms, non-existent when it came to her, snapped. "Just to see," he agreed, and closed the distance between them. The first touch of Alessandro's lips against hers was gentle, almost questioning. As if despite all the heat between them, he was still giving her the chance to pull away. Isabella melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to lock behind his neck. That small gesture of surrender broke something in Alessandro. The kiss deepened, became more urgent. His hands found her waist, lifting her effortlessly onto the counter. Isabella gasped at the movement, and Alessandro swallowed the sound, kissing her harder, deeper, with a hunger that had been building for weeks. She tasted like coffee and something sweet, something uniquely her. And Alessandro felt like a man dying of thirst who had finally found water. His hands tangled in her dark hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss even more. Isabella's legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer, eliminating any space between them. They kissed as if they were trying to make up for all the restrained weeks, all the careful distance they had maintained. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. "That was not slow," Isabella said, her voice shaky. "That was the opposite of slow." "I know," Alessandro admitted, his hands still tangled in her hair, unable to let go. "I'm sorry. I lost control. I promised slow and then—" "Don't apologize," Isabella interrupted, her fingers tracing his lips. "I was there too. I wanted it just as much." They looked at each other, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that whatever they had been trying to maintain, whatever careful boundaries they had set, had just been obliterated. "I should probably get down from this counter," Isabella said, but she made no move to do so. "Probably," Alessandro agreed, also not moving. "The food is burning." "I don't care about the food. Neither do I." They kissed again, softer this time but no less intense. When they finally pulled apart, Alessandro helped her down from the counter, but his hands lingered on her waist. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his voice was serious. "And I need you to really hear me." Isabella's heart started beating faster. "Okay, I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Simple, direct, terrifying. "I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I've never felt anything like this. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep thinking about you. Every good thing that happens, I want to tell you about it. Every challenge, I want your perspective on it." He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes intense on hers. "You've made me want things I didn't know I could want. A real relationship, a partner, someone who sees me, not just the money or the power, but me. Alessandro, the man who burns pasta and doesn't know how to cook, who loves art but was too afraid to pursue it, who has spent his entire life being what everyone expected instead of who he wanted to be." Tears were streaming down Isabella's face now. "I'm falling too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me, because what if you wake up one day and realize I'm just a nurse from Queens, That I don't fit into your world of galas and business deals and penthouses. What if you wake up and realize I'm just a man? Alessandro countered. Not the billionaire, not the empire, just Alessandro. Flawed, broken in places, trying to be better. Would you still want me? Yes, Isabella said without hesitation. God, yes. Then we figure it out. Together. He kissed her again, tender and sweet. No more slow? Isabella asked against his lips. I don't think I can do slow with you, Alessandro admitted. Every moment I'm not touching you feels like a waste. Then don't waste any more moments. That night, they lay together on the couch, Isabella tucked against Alessandro's side, his arm around her shoulders, her hand over his heart. They didn't talk much, just existed together, comfortable in the silence. Will you tell me about your first time? Alessandro asked suddenly, his fingers playing with her hair. Isabella tensed slightly. Why do you want to know? Because I want to know everything about you. Every experience that made you who you are. She was quiet for a long moment. I was 19. College boyfriend. It wasn't special. It was awkward and painful and over too quickly. He broke up with me 2 weeks later for someone else. Alessandro's arms tightened around her. He was an idiot. Probably. But it taught me something. That physical intimacy without emotional connection is empty. That I needed more than just attraction. I needed trust, respect, genuine caring. And have you found that since then? Not really. I dated, had relationships, but nothing that made me feel the way I do with you. This feeling like I could trust you with everything. Even the parts of myself I usually hide. Alessandro turned so he could look at her face. I want you to know something. When we take that step, and I very much hope we do, it will be nothing like what you've experienced before. Because I will worship every inch of you. I will make sure you feel cherished, desired, safe. And I will make it unforgettable. The intensity in his eyes, the absolute certainty in his voice, made Isabella's breath catch. Is that a promise? It's a vow. They didn't make love that night, despite the heat between them, the desire that crackled like electricity with every touch. They both knew it wasn't the right time. Isabella was still recovering, and more importantly, they both wanted it to mean something. Not just giving in to lust, but a conscious choice. A commitment. But they slept together, in Alessandro's massive bed, wrapped in each other's arms. It was innocent and intimate at the same time, the simple comfort of another heartbeat, another breath, someone to hold through the night. Isabella woke first, in the gray light before dawn. She studied Alessandro's face in sleep, softer somehow, younger. She traced the line of his jaw, careful not to wake him, and felt her heart expand with something so big it almost hurt. His eyes opened, caught her watching. Hi, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Hi, she whispered back. What are you thinking about? That I want to stay in this moment forever. That I'm terrified of how much I feel for you. That I've never been this happy. Alessandro pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. Stay then. Stay with me. Not just for recovery. Stay. Alessandro, I know what you're going to say. It's too fast. We need more time. But time doesn't change what I already know. I want you here. In my home. In my life. In my bed. I want to wake up to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. What about my apartment? My things? My independence? Keep the apartment. We'll get your things and bring them here. Make this place feel like a home instead of a museum. And your independence? He smiled. I don't want to take that from you. I want to be your partner, not your keeper. Isabella looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. This wasn't about control or possession. It was about wanting to build something together. Okay, she said softly. Let's try it. The joy that lit up Alessandro's face was worth any risk. He kissed her deeply, pouring all his happiness into that kiss, and Isabella felt herself falling even more. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. True to his word, Alessandro had movers pack up Isabella's small studio apartment and integrate her things into the penthouse. Suddenly the pristine space had personality. Her books on the shelves next to his, her colorful throw pillows on the minimalist couch, her photos of her family on the mantel. The place became a home. Alessandro also made good on his promise to support her dreams. He set up a study for her, a quiet space where she could do her coursework for her nurse practitioner program. He hired a tutor when she struggled with pharmacology, the best in the city, and never made her feel like it was charity. It was investment in their future together. Isabella, for her part, brought life to Alessandro's rigid world. She convinced him to leave work early sometimes, just to walk through Central Park. She introduced him to her family, and watching Alessandro charmed her Brazilian mother with his halting Portuguese was one of the highlights of her life. The dinner with Isabella's family was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon in late March. As the date approached, Alessandro found himself more nervous than he had been before any business negotiation. "They're going to love you," Isabella assured him for the 10th time as they drove to Queens in his Mercedes. Marcus was driving while they sat in the back, Alessandro's hand gripping hers perhaps a bit too tightly. "What if they don't?" Alessandro asked, and there was genuine anxiety in his voice. "What if they think I'm not good enough for you? Or too different?" Isabella squeezed his hand. "My parents emigrated from Brazil with nothing. They built a life through hard work and love. They value character, not bank accounts. Just be yourself. What if myself isn't enough?" She turned to face him fully. "Alessandro Romano, you saved my life. You've treated me with more respect and tenderness than anyone ever has. You support my dreams. You make me laugh. You make me feel cherished. That's who you are. That's more than enough." The Santos home was a modest 2-story house in Astoria, with a small front garden that Isabella's mother, Maria, maintained with obvious pride. Before they could even reach the door, it burst open, and a woman who was clearly an older version of Isabella came rushing out. "Minha filha," Maria cried, pulling Isabella into a crushing hug. Then she turned to Alessandro, and he found himself subjected to the same enthusiastic embrace. "And you must be Alessandro. Isabella has told us so much about you. Come inside. Lunch is ready." The house smelled incredible. Garlic, cumin, something simmering that made Alessandro's mouth water. The interior was warm and cluttered in the best way. Family photos covering every surface, comfortable, well-worn furniture, the kind of lived-in feeling his penthouse had lacked until Isabella moved in. Isabella's father, Roberto, emerged from what Alessandro assumed was the living room. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with calloused hands that spoke of manual labor and eyes that assessed Alessandro with the wariness of a father meeting the man dating his daughter. "Mr. Santos," Alessandro said, extending his hand. "Thank you for having me in your home." Roberto's handshake was firm, testing. "Call me Roberto, and we'll see if thanks are in order after you survive lunch with this family." Isabella had 2 younger siblings, her brother Marco, 23 and in dental school, and her sister Sofia, 19 and in her first year at NU. They both regarded Alessandro with curiosity mixed with protectiveness. The lunch was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. Multiple conversations happening simultaneously, people talking over each other, laughter and teasing. It was so different from the silent formal dinners of Alessandro's childhood that he felt almost overwhelmed. "So, Alessandro," Roberto said during a brief lull in conversation. "Isabella tells me you're in real estate." "Yes, sir. My company develops commercial and residential properties primarily in Manhattan." "He's being modest," Isabella interjected. "Romano Enterprises built the Solstice Tower, the Meridian Complex. Half the skyline you see from here." Roberto's eyebrows rose. "Impressive. Must be demanding work." "It can be," Alessandro admitted. "But recently I've been reevaluating priorities, trying to find better balance between work and life." He looked at Isabella as he said it, And Maria, who missed nothing, smiled. That's good. My husband worked himself nearly to death when we first came here. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I finally told him, what good is money if you're too tired to enjoy life with your family? Your wife is a wise woman, Alessandro said to Roberto. The wisest, Roberto agreed, reaching over to squeeze Maria's hand in a gesture so natural and affectionate, it made Alessandro's chest tight. This was what he had never had. This easy, comfortable love. Tell me, Alessandro, Marco said, leaning forward. What are your intentions with my sister, Marco? Isabella protested, but Alessandro held up a hand. No, it's a fair question. He met Marco's eyes directly. I love your sister. I know we haven't been together long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. My intention is to make her happy, to support her dreams, to be the partner she deserves. And if she gets sick again? If there are problems? This from Sofia, who despite her young age had her sister's same fierce protectiveness. Then I'll be there, Alessandro said simply. Whatever she needs, whenever she needs it. I already proved that, and I'll keep proving it every day if she'll let me. The table was silent for a moment. Then Roberto nodded slowly. Good. Because my daughter deserves someone who stays. After lunch, Maria insisted on showing Alessandro the family photo albums, much to Isabella's embarrassment. Alessandro found himself charmed by pictures of a gap-toothed little girl with serious eyes, a teenager in nursing scrubs on her first day of clinical training, graduation photos with a smile so proud it lit up the image. She's always been special, my Isabella, Maria said softly, turning pages. Even as a little girl, always wanting to help people. Once she found a bird with a broken wing and insisted we take it to a vet. Cried for days when it didn't survive. She still has that same heart, Alessandro said. It's one of the things I love most about her. She cares so deeply about everyone. Maria looked at him shrewdly. And you? Do you care deeply? Or is my daughter just another pretty thing for a rich man to acquire? The directness of the question caught Alessandro off guard, but he appreciated it. I spent most of my life acquiring things, Mrs. Santos. Buildings, companies, assets. Things that ultimately meant nothing because they were just objects. Isabella is not a thing to acquire. She's a person who has made me want to be better. Who has shown me what actually matters in life. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know you probably have concerns, the difference in our backgrounds, our financial situations. I understand that. But I promise you, I see your daughter for exactly who she is. Not because of what I can give her, but because of what she's already given me. A reason to actually live instead of just exist. Maria's stern expression softened. You really love her. More than I knew I could love anyone. Then you have my blessing, but hurt her. And I don't care how much money you have or how many buildings you own. You'll answer to me. Alessandro smiled, seeing exactly where Isabella got her fierce strength. I would expect nothing less. When it was time to leave, the entire family walked them to the car. Maria pressed a container of leftovers into Isabella's hands despite her protests, and Roberto shook Alessandro's hand again, this time with warmth. You're good for her, Roberto said quietly, too low for the others to hear. I can see it in her eyes. She's happy. Really happy. She's good for me, too, Alessandro replied honestly. She's everything. In the car on the way back to Manhattan, Isabella curled against Alessandro's side, her head on his shoulder. That wasn't so bad, was it? She asked. It was perfect. Your family is amazing. They liked you. I could tell. How could you tell? My mom only hugs people she genuinely likes. And my dad? That second handshake? That was his seal of approval. Marco and Sofia will come around. They're just protective. Alessandro kissed the top of her head. I'm glad I passed the test. There was never any doubt. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights blur past the windows. Then Isabella said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For being willing to meet them, for not being weird about where I come from, or how different our backgrounds are. For just being you." Isabella, I meant what I said to your brother. I love you. All of you. Your family, your background, your history. It's all part of what makes you who you are. He tilted her face up to kiss her softly. Besides, your family has something mine never did. Real love. Real connection. I'd trade every dollar I have for what your parents have together. That night, back at the penthouse, they were both quiet. Alessandro poured them wine and they sat on the terrace despite the chill in the air, wrapped in blankets looking out at the city. "What are you thinking?" Isabella asked. "That I want this. A real family. The kind of love your parents have. Children who grow up knowing they're loved, not just assets to be managed." He turned to look at her. "I want that with you." Isabella's breath caught. "Alessandro." "Not now," he said quickly. "I'm not proposing or demanding anything. I just want you to know. When I think about my future, you're in every image. You in a home that's really a home. Maybe children someday if you want them. A life that's about more than just business deals and profit margins." Tears sparkled in Isabella's eyes. "I want that too. I've always wanted a family, but I never thought I'd find someone I could build that with. Someone who understood both my career and my need for something more. We'll build it together," Alessandro promised. Slowly, at our own pace but together. They kissed, soft and sweet, a promise of things to come. When they finally went inside, the temperature having dropped too much to stay outside, Alessandro pulled Isabella close. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "Not in the guest room. In my bed. Our bed." "Just sleeping?" Isabella asked, though her eyes said she knew the answer might be different. "That depends on you." "I meant what I said. When we make love, I want it to be because we're both ready. Because it's the right moment. Not because of pressure or expectation." Isabella looked up at him, at this man who had shown her nothing but respect and tenderness, who had saved her life and then proceeded to show her what it meant to really live. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'm ready. If you are." Alessandro's eyes darkened with desire, but his voice remained gentle. "Are you sure? There's no rush. I'm sure. I want this. I want you. Then I'll make it unforgettable. I promise you." Alessandro took Isabella's hand and led her to the bedroom, his heart pounding harder than it had before any business negotiation or high-stakes meeting. This mattered more than any of that. This was everything. The bedroom was bathed in soft light from the city outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. Alessandro turned to face Isabella, cupping her face in his hands. "If at any point you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no disappointment. Your comfort is all that matters to me." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes at his tenderness. "I trust you. I know you do. And I will honor that trust with everything I have." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring all his love and desire into that kiss. His hands were gentle as they began to explore, skimming over her shoulders, down her arms, learning the curve of her waist. Isabella's fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, and Alessandro smiled against her lips. "Nervous?" he asked softly. "A little. Is that okay?" "More than okay. I'm nervous too." "You are?" "Terrified. Because this means something. You mean something. Everything, actually. He helped her with his shirt, shrugging it off and tossing it aside. Isabella's hands went to his chest, exploring the planes of muscle, the warmth of his skin. Alessandro inhaled sharply at her touch, his control already strained. Slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, he helped her out of her dress. She stood before him in simple cotton underwear, nothing fancy or seductive, and Alessandro thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "You're perfect," he breathed. Isabella laughed nervously. "I'm really not. I have stretch marks and scars and—" "You're perfect," Alessandro repeated firmly. "Every mark, every scar, tells a story. And I want to learn every single one." He led her to the bed, laying her down gently on the Egyptian cotton sheets. Then he proceeded to worship her exactly as he had promised. He kissed every inch of skin he revealed, murmuring words of praise and desire in Italian and English. "Bella, sei bellissima. You're so beautiful. So soft. I love the way you respond to my touch." Isabella had never experienced anything like this. Her previous encounters had been rushed, focused on the destination rather than the journey. But Alessandro was in no hurry. He took his time, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch, what made her moan his name. "Alessandro," she breathed when his lips found a particularly sensitive spot on her neck. "Please. Please what, amore? Tell me what you need. You. I need you. You have me. All of me. Forever." When he finally joined their bodies, he moved with exquisite care. He watched her face, attentive to every flicker of discomfort or pleasure, adjusting his movements to match her responses. "Okay?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. "More than okay," Isabella gasped. "Don't stop. Never." The first time was tender and slow, Alessandro keeping his promise to make it unforgettable through his complete focus on her pleasure and comfort. When Isabella finally shattered in his arms, crying out his name, Alessandro felt something in his chest crack open. This wasn't just physical. This was souls recognizing each other. Two broken pieces finding their perfect fit. They made love 3 more times that night, each encounter different. The second time with more confidence as Isabella began to understand what she liked, what made her feel powerful and desired. The third time with playful exploration, laughter mixed with passion as they learned each other's bodies. The fourth time was different. It was nearly dawn, and they had been dozing wrapped around each other when Alessandro woke to find Isabella watching him with an intensity that took his breath away. "What is it?" he asked sleepily. "I love you," she said simply. "I know I haven't said it yet, not out loud, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." Alessandro's eyes filled with tears. "Say it again." "I love you, Alessandro Romano. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you make me feel cherished. I love the way you look at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters." "Because you are," Alessandro said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're my world now, Isabella." This time when they made love, it was with a depth of emotion that overwhelmed them both. They moved together as if they had been doing this for years, perfectly in sync, each anticipating the other's needs. And when Alessandro felt Isabella tense in his arms, her body trembling as she approached her release, he whispered against her ear exactly what he had promised that very first day. "This is unforgettable. You are unforgettable. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are." Isabella shattered with a cry that was half pleasure, half sob, and Alessandro followed her over the edge moments later, her name a prayer on his lips. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together, hearts racing and skin damp with exertion, Alessandro noticed something. A small amount of blood on the sheets. His entire body froze. "Isabella," he said, his voice strange. "What?" she asked drowsily. "You told me you weren't a virgin. You said you had a boyfriend in college." Isabella tensed. "I did," We tried. It just never worked. It hurt too much and he lost patience. And we broke up before we ever actually completed the act. Alessandro pulled back to look at her face. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to treat me differently. To be too careful. I wanted to just be with you without that pressure. His eyes filled with tears. You gave me something precious. Something you've never given anyone. And I didn't know. I should have known. I should have been even more careful, even more. Isabella pressed her fingers to his lips. You were perfect. It was perfect. I wouldn't change a single moment. You made it exactly what I needed it to be. Loving, gentle, intense, real. You kept your promise, Alessandro. It was unforgettable. He gathered her into his arms, holding her so tight it almost hurt. I love you so much I don't have words for it. Then show me, Isabella whispered against his chest. Show me every day. That's all I need. As the sun rose over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they finally fell asleep. Alessandro's last conscious thought was that his life had truly begun the night Isabella collapsed in that hotel lobby. Everything before that had just been preparation for this, for her. For them. When they woke hours later, Alessandro ordered breakfast from Isabella's favorite cafe. They ate in bed, feeding each other bites of pastry and fruit, laughing and talking about everything and nothing. So, Isabella said, a mischievous glint in her eye. 4 times in one night. That's quite impressive for a businessman. Alessandro grinned. I'm a man of many talents, though I have to admit, I've never been quite so motivated before. Only 4, though. I seem to remember you promising 7 at some point. That was a different story, Alessandro protested, then seeing the challenge in her eyes, pulled her close. But I'm nothing if not ambitious. Give me a goal, and I'll exceed it. Isabella laughed, that free, joyous sound he loved, and kissed him. I love you, you ridiculous man. And I love you, my beautiful Isabella, more than buildings, more than business, more than anything in this world. The weeks following that transformative night were the happiest of Alessandro's life. He and Isabella settled into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, as if they had been doing this dance for lifetimes. They were that couple that everyone noticed, the ones who couldn't stop touching, who looked at each other as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Isabella continued her nursing shifts at Bellevue, and Alessandro surprised everyone, including himself, by occasionally showing up at the end of her shifts to take her home. The first time he did it, her coworkers were stunned into silence. Alessandro Romano, in his expensive suit, standing in the hospital cafeteria with flowers, waiting patiently while Isabella finished her notes. Girl, that man is obsessed with you, her friend and fellow nurse Carmen said with undisguised envy. He's pretty great, Isabella agreed with a smile she couldn't contain. Pretty great? Honey, he's perfect, rich, gorgeous, and the way he looks at you? Like you hung the moon and stars just for him. Isabella watched Alessandro through the cafeteria window. He was on his phone, probably dealing with some business crisis, but the moment he saw her looking, his entire face transformed. The serious businessman disappeared, replaced by a man so clearly in love, it made her heart ache. I'm the lucky one, she said softly, but it wasn't all perfect. There were challenges. Isabella's world and Alessandro's world were starkly different, and sometimes those differences created friction. Like the first charity gala Alessandro invited her to attend. I don't know if I can do this, Isabella said, looking at herself in the mirror. Alessandro had sent a stylist to help her prepare, and the woman had transformed her into someone Isabella barely recognized. The dress was beautiful, a deep emerald green that brought out her eyes. Designer and probably worth more than she made in a month. Her hair was swept up, makeup professionally done. She looked like she belonged in Alessandro's world, but she didn't feel like herself. You're beautiful, Alessandro said from the doorway, and the reverence in his voice was real. I look like someone else. Like I'm playing dress-up. He crossed to her, taking her hands. Then change. Wear whatever makes you feel like you. I don't care if you show up in scrubs, Isabella. I just want you there with me. She looked up at him. At this man who would probably prefer she wore the designer gown but was willing to let her be herself, to her, taking her hands. Then change. Wear whatever makes you feel like you. I don't care if you show up in scrubs, Isabella. I just want you there with me. She looked up at him. At this man who would probably prefer she wore the designer gown but was willing to let her be herself, and felt her anxiety ease. No, I can do this. I just needed to hear that it doesn't matter to you. Nothing matters except you being happy and comfortable. The gala was overwhelming, a sea of designer dresses and expensive suits, conversations about investments and vacation homes in the Hamptons, people who spoke a language of privilege that Isabella had never learned. She felt out of place, despite Alessandro's hand never leaving hers, despite the way he introduced her to everyone with obvious pride. And this is my Isabella, he would say, and the possessiveness in his voice made her feel cherished even as she felt inadequate. It was during cocktail hour that it happened. Isabella had excused herself to use the restroom, and when she returned, she found Alessandro in conversation with a stunning blonde in a dress that probably cost more than Isabella's nursing school tuition. Alessandro, darling, the woman was saying, her hand on his arm in a way that was far too familiar. I haven't seen you in ages. Not since we broke up. You look well. Alessandro gently but firmly removed her hand. Clarissa, I am well, and I'd like you to meet Isabella, my girlfriend. He said the word girlfriend as if it meant so much more, as if it meant forever. Clarissa's eyes swept over Isabella, taking in the dress that was beautiful but clearly not quite right, the slightly overwhelmed expression, the way Isabella didn't quite fit into this world. How lovely, Clarissa said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And what do you do, Isabella? I'm a nurse, Isabella said, lifting her chin despite the dismissive look in Clarissa's eyes. How noble. Alessandro always did have a soft spot for charity cases. The words were delivered with a sweet smile, but the insult was clear. Isabella felt heat flood her face, but before she could respond, Alessandro stepped between them. Clarissa, I'm going to say this once and I need you to really hear me. Isabella is not a charity case. She's the woman I love. She saves lives while you shop on Fifth Avenue. She works 70-hour weeks to pursue her education while you lunch with your trust fund friends. She has more substance in her little finger than you'll ever possess. His voice was cold, cutting. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to spend time with people who actually matter. He took Isabella's hand and led her away, leaving Clarissa staring after them in shock. Once they were alone on a balcony overlooking the city, Alessandro turned to Isabella. I'm sorry. I should have warned you that people in my world can be cruel and shallow. Is that what you think of me? Isabella asked quietly. That I'm a charity case you rescued? What? God, no. Isabella, you're the only real thing in my life. You make me better. Make me want to be better. But she has a point, doesn't she? We're from completely different worlds. I don't know which fork to use at these dinners. I can't talk about art auctions or private islands. I work for a living while everyone here has trust funds. Alessandro cupped her face in his hands. I don't want you to fit into my world. I want to build a new world with you. One that's ours. One that values what actually matters. And what matters? Love. Connection. Using our resources to help people instead of just accumulating more. Building something that lasts beyond quarterly earnings reports. He kissed her softly. You've shown me all of that. Don't let people like Clarissa make you doubt your worth. You're worth 1,000 of her. 1,000,000. Isabella leaned into him, feeling the truth of his words even as her insecurity lingered. Can we leave? Absolutely. I've made my appearance. Now I'd rather be somewhere I actually want to be. Which is anywhere you are. They left the gala early, ditching the designer clothes for comfortable sweats the moment they got home. They ordered pizza and ate it on the floor, watching old movies and laughing. And it was perfect. More perfect than any charity gala could ever be. But the incident had planted a seed of doubt in Isabella's mind. Over the next few weeks, she became more aware of the differences between them. The way Alessandro's world expected certain things. The social obligations, the charity events, the business dinners where spouses were expected to be charming accessories. One night, after a particularly difficult shift where she had lost a patient despite her best efforts, Isabella came home to find Alessandro hosting an impromptu business dinner. She had forgotten he mentioned it, exhausted and emotionally drained. She walked into the penthouse in her scrubs, her hair a mess, eyes red from crying over the elderly man who had died in her arms. Isabella, Alessandro said, standing immediately. His business associates, 3 men in expensive suits, turned to look at her. I'm sorry, she said, backing toward the bedroom. I forgot. I'll just... Excuse me, gentlemen, Alessandro said, already moving toward her. He didn't care about the deal they were negotiating. Didn't care that walking away was probably costing him millions. He only cared about the devastation he saw in Isabella's eyes. In the bedroom, he found her sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her scrubs, tears streaming down her face. Hey, he said softly, kneeling in front of her, talk to me. I lost him, she whispered. Mr. Chen. He was 82. His wife has been visiting every day for 3 weeks. I promised her I would take care of him, and I lost him. Alessandro pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, we can't save everyone. But that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. They stayed like that for long minutes, Isabella crying out her grief and frustration, while Alessandro simply held her, offering the comfort of his presence. Finally, she pulled back. Your dinner, your deal. I ruined it. You didn't ruin anything. They can wait. You're more important. Alessandro, you can't keep choosing me over your business. It's not sustainable. He looked at her seriously. I can and I will, every single time, because you are my priority. You, us, this life we're building. The business will survive. It always does. But you? You're irreplaceable. Fresh tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. The next morning, Isabella woke to find Alessandro already gone. A note on his pillow said he had gone to the office early to reschedule the meeting from the night before. She felt guilty, knowing she had disrupted his work, knowing that her world and his were sometimes in conflict. She was making coffee when her phone rang. An unknown number. Hello, Miss Santos? This is Margaret Chen. You were my husband's nurse. Peter Chen? Isabella's heart clenched. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your husband was a wonderful man. He was. And I wanted to thank you. I know he died, but the care you gave him those last weeks, the dignity you preserved, the kindness you showed both of us, it mattered. It made his passing bearable. The woman's voice broke. You held his hand when I had to step out. You talked to him even when he couldn't respond. You treated him like a person, not just a patient. That means everything. Isabella was crying again. It was an honor to care for him. After the call ended, Isabella sat at the kitchen counter, thinking. This was her purpose. This was what she was meant to do. But could she balance it with being Alessandro's partner? With the demands of his world? The answer came 2 weeks later when Alessandro asked her to marry him. They were back at that same small cafe in Soho where they had first reconnected after the hospital. Same table, same quiet corner. Isabella Santos, Alessandro began. taking her hand. You walked into my life when I was just existing, not living. You showed me what matters, what's real, and I can't imagine spending even one day without you. He pulled out a simple velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring, not ostentatious or showy, but elegant. A single diamond that caught the light. Marry me. Not because I can give you things, but because I can't live without you. Because you make me better. Because I choose you. Every day. Forever. Isabella looked at him through tears. At this man who had kept every promise, who had shown her what real love looked like. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. And outside the city continued on, but inside that small cafe, two souls who had found each other against all odds began planning their forever.